Hi and welcome to my OCR A-level biology revision session with me, Christine. So today's lesson I want to look at thermoregulation in endotherms. But before we can do that, I need to take you back and remind you about your sensory receptors. Now, this is animal response module, but is very important when we talk about how thermoregulation occurs. So these groups of differentiated cells that are going to detect changes in the environment are very specific because of two main features. Number one, they are specific to detect the single type of stimulus, i.e. light, chemicals, heat, which is the one that we're interested in today, and pressure and movement. So there are different types of receptors, and what we want to look at are thermoreceptors, but all these receptors do exactly the same thing. They act as transducers to convert the stimulus from the form of light, heat, pressure, movement, chemicals into a nerve impulse, which is known as a generator potential. Now, I have done a video on sensory receptors, so do check that one out. But let's look at these thermoreceptors then. Now, there are two that you need to know. One which is found in the skin and they sense the surface temperature, and the other one which is located in the hypothalamus. So these are both thermoreceptors. They are both detecting the heat. So one, the surface temperature, the other, the blood temperature. So when your body gets too hot or when your body gets too cold, that becomes a problem because you have lots of chemical reactions occurring. Your metabolism is reliant on temperature. Too low temperature means not enough kinetic energy, not enough collisions. Too high temperature could result in the denaturation of the proteins and the enzymes and therefore reducing the rate. So the body wants to be maintained at a very narrow limit. So if your blood gets too hot or your blood gets too cold, the body has to respond. So there's two ways in which you can respond. One of those ways is known as the cooling response. So the cooling response is what's known as vasodilation, where your skin arterioles are going to dilate. Now, when they dilate, that means that the lumen is going to widen. More blood is going to flow to the surface, meaning more heat is going to be radiated from the skin. Now, remember, if you've got vasodilation, this may appear as redness in the skin of the organism. If we want to warm the body back up again, if we want the warming response, then we do what's called vasoconstriction. So vasoconstriction is when these skin arterioles are going to constrict. We're going to make that lumen smaller. Therefore, there's going to be less blood flow to the surface. Instead, the blood is going to be shunted along through the capillaries. And by doing that, it means there's less heat that's going to be radiated from the skin. So it's important that you're using the terms skin arterioles that are either dilating or constricting. And how do they dilate or constrict? Well, the signals that are being sent go to the muscles, the smooth muscles, which are part of the blood vessels. So they could link in module 3 here and the structure of the blood vessel. So another way of cooling the body down is through the production of sweat. So another way that the body can be cooled down is through the production of sweat. So when your blood temperature gets too high, your coordination center is going to signal for your sweat glands to produce sweat. Now, sweat is a liquid which is put onto the surface of the skin, and what will happen is, due to water having a high latent heat of vaporization, when that sweat evaporates, when it is changed from the liquid state to the gaseous state, it will release heat and that will cool the body down, therefore cooling the blood down just below the surface of the skin, and that will be circulated around the rest of the body. So this is one of the ways in which we can cool the body down. Now, another way is that as I sit here, the hairs on my arm are lying flat. Well, if I were to walk outside without putting on my layers, then what may happen is my body may go into its warming up mechanism, where my sympathetic nervous system is going to signal for my muscles to contract. And you'll learn more about the sympathetic nervous system in the animal response videos. But if my nervous system is signaling for my muscles to contract, that's going to cause the hair follicles to stand upright. Now, what this does is this creates bumps on the skin surface. These are called goosebumps. Now, we don't really have that much hair on our skin, but remember, an endotherm isn't just humans, it's mammals and birds. So these hair follicles, or these feathers that could be with regards to on the birds, they are going to stand upright. And because they stand upright, what's going to happen is that's going to trap a layer of air, which will provide insulation. So it's the endotherms physiological response in that they will trap this air, providing that insulation. So let's just look at it as a whole then. My blood temperature should be maintained within a very narrow limit. And you can see that here as 36.4 to 37.6. If I have my blood temperature rise up, I will then have that detected in the hypothalamus. That will then start the cooling mechanisms. So the cooling mechanisms, vasodilation, sweat production, hairs lying flat, that will lower my temperature, and that should keep me within my range. So that is showing you negative feedback. There has been a stimulus and the response has reduced the magnitude of that stimulus. That is negative feedback. If I go the opposite way, if my blood temperature gets too low, the hypothalamus is going to detect it. It will then, because it's the coordination center, it will start the warming mechanism, vasoconstriction, shivering, muscles are contracting and relaxing, my hairs are standing up, therefore my blood temperature should rise up. So again, my temperature was getting too low. I have reversed the magnitude of that stimulus by negative feedback through these responses. So it's important you understand the thermoregulation of the endotherms and how that ensures that they maintain that internal body temperature at a constant level. So I hope you've liked this video, and if you have, then please do click on the like button and subscribe to my channel. If you haven't already done so, do check out my revision platform, www.aiqchat.com.